Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. 2, 3. That's right. Dr. Strangelove, The Bombing Run. You've got it. That is a movie that belongs in the 20th century, but the way things are going in Eastern Europe, well, we'll see. Dr. Strangelove 2, farther afield things have happened in Hollywood. Mary Kissel, of the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, joins me. Mary is the host of Opinion Journal at WSJ Live. We're going to Australia later and playing Mary's theme music from Mad Max. There's a new Mad Max music.
I don't know why that's our theme music, John.
Because it's associated with Australia.
I don't get it. Because of Mel Gibson?
Because the
That's
series,
kind of a reach.
The series was so successful, and it's going to continue. I see on the billboard that's taller than a skyscraper across the street from Pennsylvania Station that there'll be a new Mad Max in May. So we're ready for it. Anyway, we're going to Australia later to talk about Julie Bishop, who is now the foreign minister of Australia, recently traveled to Tehran and is expected or continues to be a prospect much mentioned as prime minister. Correct, Mary?
Correct.
So we're going to talk about Julie Bishop later, but we're going to start tonight with Mary's show today, and you can view it on video, and we're going to review it. She spoke with Alicia Finley of the editorial board, with Joe Rago of the editorial board, and with our colleague Bill Whalen at the Hoover Institution. First, Alicia Finley, this is the war between the Democrats over trade. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, wants the TPP to do with the Pacific Rim. The Republicans in the Senate and many Republicans in the House want the TPP. And right now, the puzzle is, are there enough votes to overwhelm the Democratic resistance? Even with the president's advocacy, the Democrats look completely dug in, especially Harry Reid, who I think he said Hades no to the idea
Yes.
of voting for trade.
Yes. Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership 12-nation agreement of the nations of the Pacific Rim actually started under the George W. Bush administration, and various trade representatives of the United States in the Obama era have been assiduously working to complete this deal. But they cannot complete the deal until our trading partners know that the 535 members of Congress won't renegotiate it after the deal is struck. So that's why this thing called Fast Track Trade Authority is so important. It says to Congress, you set the trade goals. You White House trade representative, go out and negotiate the best deal that you can. And then when you bring it back to us, we'll have an up or down vote on the final deal. And so this gives the trade representative the leverage to go out and negotiate the best possible deal for the United States, for our businesses, for our employers. So you're right, John. There is dissonance in both sides of politics, but it's especially interesting on the left side of politics, because the president ran on an anti-trade agenda to satisfy his labor union supporters, who want all sorts of carve-outs and protections for organized labor and trade deals. But now the president has had this epiphany that what he's done with his economic policies hasn't worked. It's been the weakest recovery since the Great Depression, and that opening up new markets for trade might give us the jolt that we need to get past this really terrible bumping along of 2%, which leaves millions of Americans out of the workforce because there just aren't opportunities for them. So that being said, Fast Track Trade Authority, which is necessary as a precursor to doing this big Asia deal, passed out of the Senate Finance Committee by a vote of 20-6. But it passed out of the committee with a kind of a poison pill, which the House has also picked up on. I won't go into that right now, but the House also has a debate. House Republicans don't trust the president.
And I understand Alicia Finley flagged that there might be much more friction in the House about this.
Yeah, wasn't that interesting?
Yes.
Very interesting. Look, there's a wing of the Republican Party that just does not trust the president because he's taken all these executive actions on immigration and Obamacare subsidies, and instead of going and actually doing the legwork of politics, in other words, getting a bill and a compromise together that both sides can live with and passing it into law, he just circumvents that. So the Republicans do have a point. However, the Republican Party supposed to be the party of economic opportunity and trade opening. So the idea that they would be against a final trade deal
if
is
the president's
just crazy.
for it, we're not sure we're for it.
Oh,
There's
it's crazy. It's
hesitation. We move now to another matter that's before the court. That's the Supreme Court of the United States. This is King v. Burwell. We're expecting a decision in about 60 days. At the end of June would be a guess. This has to do with the language in the Affordable Care Act that was sloppy, accidental, ambiguous to the point of reckless, and the argument brought by many states, the plaintiffs in this case, that the language precludes the federal government stepping in and supplanting the absence of subsidies of state exchanges that pay subsidies to people who need help for their insurance. It's complicated only in that the arguments before the courts turned on the word state. We're not going to go that route. We're going to go to the route of the Republicans preparing a plan B in the event that the Supreme Court rules for the plaintiffs. The Republican Party has been comfortable these last years saying we're against the Affordable Care Act. We oppose Obamacare. We want complete repeal. Joe Rago joined you of the editorial board. He believes that's an inadequate response, and he points to the fact that the Republicans have one senator who's bringing forward with co-sponsors an alternative.
30 co-sponsors. So Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson brought forward a bill, as you said, supported by many in his party, in the Senate at least, that said, look, if the Supreme Court strikes down subsidies to 30-odd states, there are going to be millions of Americans who don't have health care. So from a moral perspective, but also from a political perspective, it's important that the Republican Party step in and say, we want to cover you immediately. We're not going to leave you hanging. But in return for that, White House, we want you to give more flexibility to the states to come up with better healthcare solutions, more choice. So the gamble here is that in doing so, they have some sort of leverage over the White House. My fear is that when they do that, the president will say, what, you don't want to cover however many million people need cancer treatments, right? So, we'll see what the leverage actually is.
There is a calendar here that seemed significant to me, that Senator Johnson wants to move it past the election process in 2016 and fix this in the new Congress with a new president.
Well, there's a distinction in the Republican Party between practically minded people like Senator Johnson and, shall we say, windbags who simply want to rail against the president and leave all those millions of people hanging. I think what you're seeing in Senator Johnson is a pragmatic, practical solution to a very big potential problem. And, we'll see how the party reacts. But I think you'll learn a lot about your senator in watching his reaction to this proposal.
I mentioned that Senator Johnson is one of the two seats identified by the Democrats as targeted for the 2016 cycle, the other being Mr. Kirk in Illinois. Finally, our colleague Bill Whalen. This is to do with the open seat coming in California, Barbara Boxer's retirement from the Senate, for the Democratic Party, which dominates the precincts in California. Kamala Harris is the very popular and rock star of an attorney general. And she is the only one, I think her hat, or all five of her hats, are in the ring right now. And it looks like, much as Mrs. Clinton looks like, there's going to be competition, but not recently. And she's running away with it, except for Bill introduced a name that came back to me as soon as I heard it. Sanchez. Who's that?
Loretta Sanchez. She's a House member, comes from Orange County. Right. And she is a street fighter and very willing, according to Bill, to play the race card and to play identity politics. In other words, to take the political discussion really in a very negative direction, not a constructive direction for the society at large. That's another point. In any event, she could make life very difficult for Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris is an African-American, a very popular figure in the Democratic Party. Loretta Sanchez is a Hispanic-American, Latino-American, very popular figure, and especially a veteran campaigner from Orange County. Loretta Sanchez is not in the race.
No.
Right? It's just
testing
talk.
the waters.
It's just talk. But, Mary, this This underlines identity politics. And if you play identity politics, it can come back on you. There are far, far more voters for Latino Democrats than there are for African American Democrats, leaving the Democratic Party in a quandary. Two very well qualified candidates. However, they both check off the same boxes with different constituents.
That's because the Democrats have a dearth of ideas, if I may say so. If you look at Kamala Harris, what is she for?
Bill didn't know. And if Bill didn't know, that means she hasn't said anything yet.
Well,
she doesn't have to. Much like Mrs. Clinton, there's no reason to state anything.
Well, look, she's a populist. She attacks the banks, attacks employers, wants to give handouts to folks. This is not...
It is California.
It is California.
I mentioned, however, there's going to be another seat come open in California, and we believe with Dianne Feinstein's retirement in a few years' time. So there's room for two liberal Democratic females who represent the constituents of California in these next years. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and the host of Opinion Journal, each day at WSJ Live, each day at 1 p.m. East Coast time. I'm John Batchelor.